Thank you for the organizers that they invited me to talk about a study that am I doing something wrong? I go one step further. So this study was commissioned by the European Commission, and this is something that we always wanted to do. We always wanted to understand what data are available to boost confidence that Europe can stand up to international competition in the space of silver economy. I don't have to go in depth to say that the demographic change is obviously changing many ways we do in life. I actually looked up some statistics for Spain, which are fascinating, how many people live over 100 years old. And in 2002, the estimate was around 4,000 or 5,000 people. By 2016, it was close to 20,000. So around 40 people out of 100,000 live over 100 years old. And obviously, with a longer life, we hope that we will live a happier life as well. But the two are not always connected. So are there products and services available to make that happen? This study was commissioned at Technopolis, where I'm a principal for health, and Oxford Economics. We did together that study. And the reason why we joined forces with Oxford Economics, because they delivered a landmark study in the US about the longevity economy, and they established baseline numbers, what is the size of that market. So that study was now published, and it's available for everyone. It has a thick appendix that actually tells you a lot about the methodology and numbers that I'm not going to go today in detail. But I wanted to tell you how basically we can look that often people consider to be a challenge and a strain on public services to be an absolutely positive look, that it's an opportunity for young and old people, because young people can produce the products and services in order to create a more cohesive society. So what is important is that we don't forget that we celebrate the fact that we live longer, and by stimulating that social and cultural progress, we have to provide the recognition that older people are integrated and active part of the society. So, what maybe lags behind is the recognition that as we, over the life course, we change our behavior, and very few studies are available that actually consider how that behavior change is happening. And this is something that we looked a little bit into, how businesses and designers are looking at products and service design. So these were the basic questions that we set out to cover, and we obviously have to think about what is the definition, and that was the first question I was asked. And we are actually short of data. That is a difficulty, because if you go to Eurostat, what you find is what older people do above 50 and above 60. The problem is that this is not really about age, it's about abilities. But we obviously cannot use that type of data to segregate, depending on what type of work people do, depending on what kind of genetic patterns they have, or what kind of disabilities they have. Aging is a very different process. But for the definition for today, we used the age of 50, and we wanted to look at all the activities they do in their life, all economic activities, and this is what we will call the silver economy. So don't forget that it's not only what the older people consume, it's also that the people who actually provide those products and services, there is a whole value chain behind them. And once they sell their products and services, there is a family around each individual, so there is an induced effect. So I just show you the highlights today, and as I said, much more data are available to give the confidence to everyone that Europe is very big. Europe has a big silver economy, and the businesses that recognize that will benefit long term. So in 2015, we had the baseline. We wanted to look at what are the facts. And almost 40% of the EU population was over 50, close to 200 million people. And when we looked up the number, the consumption in terms of goods and services, it's almost 4 trillion euros. It's a huge, huge number. But when we looked at a little bit closer the breakdown, it is interesting to see that the private consumption by individuals is the vast majority, almost 90% of that. So the public services are there on behalf of them. It's free at the point of service. Often this is related to healthcare that the public sector provides, but this is also on behalf of the older people. So keep these numbers in mind, and when we jump ahead to 2025, so we have a 10-year horizon, you can see that the share of the older people increase, as well as the consumption pattern. We are now at 5.7 trillion in terms of size of the silver economy. These are really big numbers, and not for a second I'm suggesting that this is something new. Older people are consuming that type of size. That is the size of the market. The real question is how we can make those products and services more adapted to people. How can we increase the quality of life? How can we actually make sure that we can even stretch some of these numbers further? One thing to mention is that these are conservative estimates. The estimates are related to basically the aging process and certain GDP estimates. So whatever policymakers can do over and beyond some of these conservative assumptions will boost the numbers. We looked a little bit closely on how this is broken down to the type of industry that we are looking. So Eurostat provides that type of information. And if you look at this chart, you can see that this is the private part of the consumption. So you remember that's the 90% of the whole. You can see that housing, food, and transport are basically half of all the consumptions by the older people. What is also interesting, we were looking for where is the social service-related activity, where are the numbers, and it's basically almost invisible on the graph. It's less than 1%. In Europe, we, as individuals, private people, spend very, very little on those type of services, which I would say something that is very different, for example, in the US, where people take care of themselves using their own resources better. So, as I said, the silver economy is not only the direct consumption, but it has an impact on the overall economy in each country. So I mentioned the direct effects, that the consumption, but also the indirect and the induced. One other thing that probably we should think about is trade. We are not isolated anymore, and the question, can we keep the business here in Europe that provides the products and services? In these numbers, already 800 billion is actually coming from companies from outside of Europe. So the question is, will we have locally the skills to produce and serve the people of our own population? So here you can see, again, numbers which are showing you that around 80 million jobs are supported by the silver economy in 2015. And if you think about the silver economy in Europe as an economy and you compare it with other sovereign nations, it would be the third largest economy in the world behind the US and China. And this GDP growth will reach over 6 trillion and 88 million people will be supported. So I don't want to impress with you the numbers, but these are really big numbers. And if you are a business, if you are thinking about consumer sector, then please consider also the older people, because often businesses are blind to that group, and they have to just make with anything that was developed for other generation and try to be happy with that. We have data for each country in Europe, and obviously the consumption is bigger if the share of older people in a society is bigger. So a young country like Ireland would have a lower consumption compared to, let's say, Germany, which the participation by the older people are higher. But what we didn't expect is this graph where we plotted the growth of the private and public consumption over this 10-year period. And we almost got a linear graph. And what it shows that the more the public sector actually invests in some of these activities, the more the private sector is coming. The two are mutually reinforcing. You can see, interesting, these are growth rates, these are not absolute numbers. So if you see Romania, you can see that they are the highest in terms of growth, obviously coming from a lower baseline than others. You can see, for example, Estonia. Where is Estonia? Up there. You can see that their public consumption is actually not as high. They are above that line. So I think it's probably an interesting finding of the study and probably gives confidence to policymakers there that de-risking some of these silver economy-related work can actually boost the confidence for the private sector to invest. Quickly, just in terms of I think that we are at the right time where the technology change and the demographical change really intersect. There are a lot of interesting technologies that could be available for older people. Just we have to understand the consumer preferences. We have to adapt these products. We have to be inclusive actually in the design, the way we do that. So some of these case studies are available in the report, and what we have to make sure that we push it from niche to mainstream in order for more people can enjoy, not the ones who have the money to do, but it will be equitable for all older people. So some of those cases are all developed in our work in terms of the size of the opportunity and what kind of benefits it would provide. So in terms of steps ahead, I mentioned already the user-centric design, understanding the behavior. This is a bigger challenge in terms of digital technologies to have the right standards, interoperability, and data security. And for businesses, Europe is a fragmented market, and they have to deal with that. They have to adapt to local populations. There is no way out. And they have to have their business model right. This is also, are they reliant on public procurement, or they can basically provide services that people would be happy to pay for in order to increase their level of quality of life and happiness. The paradox for businesses that if they say that this product is for older people in Europe wouldn't buy. It's very different from an Asian mindset, for example, where older age is equal to wisdom and respected, celebrated. So we have to have that type of thinking that, for example, one of the most successful car, Ford Focus, implicitly have. It was designed with the characteristics of an older person in mind. In Germany, when they labeled the car that this is designed for an older people, it was a disaster financially. It didn't work. So basically, we need consumer products that care for the older people. The policy support I already mentioned, there has to be cross-cutting across the different silos. So these will not work anymore in their own. And some of these are very well known to you, and there are a lot of initiatives in that. So maybe the interesting thing is to think about how everything from trade agreements to immigration and working life conditions, occupational health, will have to integrate that kind of mindset. And this is the final slide that I would like to leave with you, that although the future is here, not everybody can benefit from it equally. There are systems which are absolutely fantastic for older people. Maybe this is only for the few because it's too expensive. But I'm positive in my mindset that by de-risking some of these new ideas, it will be part of our life, and we will not only live longer, but we will also live happier. Thank you very much.